Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Grinding Gear Games today put out this additional upcoming changes blog post. There's got a bit of information about some upcoming nerfs that are coming to Archnemesis modifiers again, as well as the status of planned changes to the Magic Find / culling meta, and also the Necromancer and Droughtbringer Archnemesis modifiers. So let's start with the bad news. There are no plans for a mid-league nerf to Magic Find culling. No one except the people playing Magic Find Cullers likes the fact that at the moment, the correct way to play the game is when you find one of the potential massive jackpot drop monsters to bring in a Magic Find Culler to actually land the killing blow on them. This is not fun, this is not good gameplay, this is just a complete drag and something that needs to go. The best time for it to go would be right now. The next best time for it to go would be tomorrow, and a bad time for it to go is waiting until 3.20. So there's nothing really positive to say about that. Because GGG have made promises in the past not to do mid-league nerfs, we're now stuck with this rubbish for the rest of this league. With that out of the way, there's also no plans to fix Necromancer or Droughtbringer conversion, the really disappointing conversions that exist. These are likely to stick for the rest of 3.19. Really think that Necromancer and Droughtbringer should only convert one item, maybe Entangler as well. And there's one or two others that are fairly disappointing. Those ones could just convert one item, or maybe have it so that they don't convert items, but they just add two of whatever they're going to drop. That would be fine. That would solve a lot of the annoyance of getting like 200 Blacksmith's Whetstones and thinking, you know, something there could have been a good drop. With that out of the way, let's talk about the other upcoming changes. Gems are being removed as a possible reward from some of the higher tier things in the Lake of Kalandra. This is a buff. One of the things that GGG have forgotten how to do with the Lake of Kalandra rewards. In previous leagues, especially Heist and also a few others, they had a number of interesting things that could come out of the bad reward chests. So when you're opening a jewelry chest, in Heist, most of the time you get rubbish, but you're always interested in the outcomes because sometimes you get a synthesized ring, sometimes you get a double corrupted rare, sometimes you get something else that's interesting, like a rare divination card that's jewelry themed. In the Lake of Kalandra, you get almost none of that. You mostly get rare items in these bad chests. So this means that the weapon chest, the armor chest, the jewelry chests, and the gem chests are all pretty much rubbish. If GGG were to instead have a look at some of the additional things they put into Heist in these chests, they wouldn't need to do this. However, it looks like they are removing these entirely and replacing them with currency chests. This is going to be a big buff to loot, but it's not going to be something super interesting. It's just going to be a straight swap that's going to make things drop more loot, but not make them any more interesting. They're nerfing the number of monsters that spawn in the Reflection of the Dream encounter. This is the Breach encounter, which is staggeringly difficult compared to pretty much everything else in the Lake of Kalandra. This is something that if you can survive the first 1 or 2 seconds of, you don't really get much loot for it, and most of the time you don't succeed in surviving those first couple of seconds because you just get swarmed massively, especially if it's an Esh Breach. Esh Breaches are just really lethal at the moment. Additionally, they're planning to reduce the open and close time of the breach, and this is intended both to improve game performance and also make the difficulty level of the encounter fairer. Now we get some Archnemesis nerfs. Shocked Ground from the Electrocuting Archnemesis mod is being nerfed from 25 seconds to 10 seconds. In a game as fast-paced as PathOfExile, 25 seconds and 10 seconds are both effectively permanent. I think this should be nerfed to 3 seconds, because 3 seconds is long enough that if it's going to impact the fight, it will have, and it's not going to end up being an annoyance that stays after the fight is done. Alternately, they could keep it at a long duration, but make it so that it expires 100 times faster when there are no monsters nearby. For some definition of nearby that seems fair, maybe 60 units, maybe 80. So if there's no monsters that are active within that range, then the shock ground would be removed almost instantly. I think that'd be a big improvement. 10 seconds is still too long. 10 seconds is basically unlimited duration still. They're nerfing the absolute hell out of Permafrost. They're removing the cold damage over time from it, and it is only applying chill. Now, the issue with Permafrost was not the impact that it had on fights. I thought it was quite good in fights, where it was not something that was posing a one-shot risk, but it was something you needed to pay attention to, you needed to react to. Now, it's going to be nerfed to only apply chill, and so it's going to be pretty much negligible effect for endgame characters. This effectively removes Permafrost from the game entirely. Again, I think the solution here will be to have it so that that chilled ground expires much faster if there are no active monsters nearby. Then it's still relevant as a combat tactical thing, but then once combat is over and you're trying to loot, it's no longer causing you problems. We're lowering the duration of Incendiary's fire damaging ground area from 4 seconds to about 3 seconds. 3 seconds is still the entirety of the fight in most situations, unless it's an unusual situation where you've got 2 rares next to each other, one of whom is super tanky. Again, I think the way to do this is to have it remain with a reasonable duration, but just have that duration expire really fast when there's no monsters around. They would keep Incendiary as an alternative to one-shots. It's something that is dangerous, but that is slow enough at killing you that you've got plenty of time to react to. We're increasing the cooldown of the Ice Prison Archnemesis mod from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. This one I can get behind. The duration is being increased from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. This results in 50% prison uptime rather than 60% and fewer overall prisons. Ultimately, what this is going to mean is that if you have a teleport move skill, Ice Prison is going to require 1 action from you every 10 seconds instead of 1 action every 5 seconds. If it takes you 400 milliseconds to Flame Dash, then this is going to mean that Ice Prison is going to consume 4% of your time rather than 8% of your time, and so it's going to be a significantly weaker mod overall. Additionally, if you are unable to do a teleport move skill, let's say that you're playing a Venom Guy, a Whirling Blades character or something like that, then this is going to be a massive, massive, massive reduction to how impactful Ice Prison is. However, it's still going to leave Ice Prison in a situation where it's going to be impactful. I think this is a good change here, where I've not necessarily agreed with the other nerfs to some of these mods. I think that this one is a fine one. Ice Prison will be impactful, it will change the battle, but it will not be something that gets annoying, and that's what they should be going for. A number of magic monsters are getting nerfed here, so they're disabling the on-death ground effects for Incendiary and the volatiles from Toxic. I think this is overkill. These have already been nerfed enough. They're not very dangerous now unless you are opting into more one-shots, and we'll get to that in a sec. Next, we have Flasks being able to have fractured mods, which is only going to be available through empowered elements. So this thing with its conversion modifier, most of these will be rubbish, but they will absolutely be worth picking up because the few that aren't rubbish will be really, really good. We're planning to increase the chances for Will of Chaos and Deadly End ultimatum aspects to drop from their relevant bosses. So this is Ahuatotli the Blind in the Delve Mines, and I believe Will of Chaos comes from the Val Omnitect. So they've decided that they want the Trial of Chaos to be more accessible than it currently is. We have a small patch coming out in the next couple of days with some very minor fixes, most of which is unrelated to the above changes. We'll get this set of changes out when we can. So what I wanted to talk about now is just some general things about one-shots, because it's been my experience in 3.17, 18, 19 that I haven't been being one-shot very much. I have certainly been dying, but most of the time it's been to a clear misplay that I can identify and something that I was aware of before I died. So what I wanted to point out is the things where you might be opting into one-shots that you weren't expecting. And here I have set up a really bad Atlas tree that puts together the worst things on the Atlas for getting yourself into one-shot situations. The first one is Wrath of the Cosmos. Yes, this is a good node, but it is going to cause you to get one-shot a lot. If you hit 6 altars in a zone, this is the equivalent of going from 90% all res down to 75%, or going from 80% all res down to 50%. Or, if you want to think of it for physical damage, this is the equivalent of going from having 8,000 life down to having 3,200 life. You know how tanky you can feel with 8,000 life? You're not indestructible, but you feel like you've got plenty of warning before you die in a lot of content. Wrath of the Cosmos and 6 altars, now you're looking at being as squishy as someone with 3,200 life. This is the single most dangerous node on the entire Atlas. Most people take it because it's really good, and this is something that GGG have really stuffed up with. It runs against one of the core philosophies that the endgame map system is built on, where you don't instantly get into tier 16 maps because you just get yourself overwhelmed. Wrath of the Cosmos is like adding 10, 15 tiers to a map. You can tag this and suddenly get yourself overwhelmed. Eldritch Gaze is similar as well. Eldritch altars in general are extremely rippy. These things will often give you minus 50% penalty to 2 different resistances. If you take a minus 50% penalty to a resist, and you're currently at 80% with a 75% cap, then this is going to drop you from having 75 effective resist to 30% effective resist. That is without Eldritch Gaze, so that is just the base altar effect. But with Eldritch Gaze, you might be looking at taking 2 of these resist hits at once. Suddenly, you go from taking 3,000 fire damage to being comprehensively and completely one-shot by that same fire effect. Or you go from not really getting frozen to needing your freeze immunity flask up all the time because every little hit for cold damage is suddenly doing 3,000 cold damage and freezing you instead. Eldritch Gaze, Eldritch Altars in general are something that is just staggeringly rippy, and it's a way that a lot of players are opting into one-shots, especially if they click them without raiding. Finally, there's map modifiers. One thing that everyone that's ever played hardcore knows is that the main way people start out in red maps in hardcore is by transmuting maps for a little while. And the reason for that is just how much damage there is hidden in map mods. Map mods can add a massive amount of damage, and then you can scale up their effects by 30%, and this will really be opting into a bunch of additional one-shots. So this is something that you really want to be aware of, especially with a number of map mods that double dip in various ways with this. So for instance, the crit map mod double dips on this stat. The increased effective modifiers causes those monsters to both crit more frequently and crit harder when they do crit. So that's something that double dips on this stat. Additionally, you can have the Savage mod, which is percentage increased damage, at the same time as having X% physical added as lightning, and these mods stack in a scary way when you're scaling them up in effectiveness as well. So this is the other way in which a lot of people are opting into one-shots. Once you factor those in, often it's an Archnemesis modifier that is delivering the killing blow to your character, but the actual one-shot was set up well beforehand when you chose to take a particular altar, or when you chose to allocate Wrath of the Cosmos and take a bunch of altars, or when you scaled up your map mods to a level your character couldn't cope with. And this is the reason that I'm not seeing myself getting one-shot much more. It's because I'm simply not touching altars if there's a really dangerous choice on them. I'm simply not taking those super rippy altar choices because I know this is going to get me killed. That, I think, is one of the things that is causing people to feel like Archnemesis is one-shotting them. My understanding of the purpose behind Archnemesis was that GGG looked at what was causing the most player one-shots and identified that it was a few of the old rare mods. So there was a local crit mod, there was a substantial physical aura, and there was the haste aura. And so they've gone, all right, these are the three things that are one-shotting the most. Why don't we make them much more rare and add in things that are much more telegraphed, stuff like toxic volatiles and magma barrier that will sometimes one-shot a player, but when they do get one-shot by them, everyone looks at it and goes, yeah, that was the player's fault. Whereas with the things like substantial physical aura, that could happen from off-screen with no warning at all. And so GGG have gone, all right, we're going to try and reduce the number of these one-shots that are happening. But then at the same time, they've come along and put in Wrath of the Cosmos, Eldritch Gaze, all these nodes on the Atlas tree, and have allowed players to overjuice their maps so much that now many of them are getting one-shot more than they did in the past. So keep that in mind. I think that's where a lot of the one-shots are coming from. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. Mega Varlobs have interesting results.